No one remembered exactly when Earth fell silent. One moment we were screaming, protesting, begging the stars for mercy, and the next, the transmissions stopped. The alien empires shrugged it off like a minor inconvenience, a spark snuffed out in the void. After all, Earth was a backwater, a primitive world they had barely bothered to catalog. We weren't a threat. We weren't even interesting. In the grand councils of the stars, we were written off as a failure of natural selection. They didn't realize that silence wasn't surrender. Silence was strategy. It had started decades earlier. When the first ships of the Andari Syndicate cracked through Earth's atmosphere, they expected a people too weak to resist. They hit us hard, blasted cities into dust, enslaved millions, and stripped our oceans for their precious minerals. The survivors were herded into camps or left to rot in the ruins. The aliens thought that was the end of the story. But humans have a peculiar flaw. We don't break easily. Hidden deep underground, under mountains and ocean floors, in crumbling subway tunnels and forgotten bunkers, humanity built. We salvaged tech from the wrecks the Andari left behind. We dissected their machines, figured out their language, understood their weapons. We copied what we could, innovated what we couldn't, and quietly stitched it all together into something new, something terrifying. The galaxy moved on, forgetting us. The Andari fleet moved on to bigger targets, richer worlds. Only a skeletal force remained in orbit. A token garrison meant more to satisfy political requirements than anything else. Their arrogance insulated us. It gave us time. It gave us purpose. When the first of the Dreadnoughts broke free of the Greenland ice, it sent no warning, no proud broadcast, no declaration of independence. It rose from the ice like a leviathan, dark and silent, plates of alien alloy stitched together with human stubbornness. The garrison didn't even notice it until it was too late. When the Dreadnoughts' guns woke, they sang a song the stars hadn't heard in millennia. Pure, unfiltered rage. The orbital stations disintegrated under withering barrages of kinetic rounds and plasma lances. Their sleek Andari design crumpled like tin under the Dreadnoughts' fury. Their calls for backup were intercepted, jammed, silenced just as easily. Earth wasn't just surviving anymore. We were hunting. I remember standing on the cracked concrete of New Boston, watching the burning debris rain down from the sky. People cheered, their fists raised, tears cutting paths through the grime on their faces. It wasn't just vengeance, it was something deeper. A primal surge of hope, something we hadn't dared feel for generations. The first Dreadnought was called Vengeance. A name chosen not by some commander or general, we didn't have those anymore, but by a mechanic who had welded the last piece of its hull together. A name whispered in bunkers, painted in blood-red letters across its armored flanks. We didn't stop with one. Within weeks, 2 more rose from the jungles of the Amazon, stitched together by tribes who had once been thought lost to the world. Another clawed its way out of the crumbled ruins of old Shanghai. The Dreadnoughts weren't clean, polished, or pretty. They were brutal, they were monstrous, and they were ours. When the Andari realized what was happening, they panicked. They sent a distress signal out to the wider galaxy. They begged for reinforcements. But by the time the response fleets were marshaled, Earth was already bristling with steel and fury. The galaxy thought Earth was defenseless. They were wrong. We had been silent because we were preparing to scream. The message that Earth had risen spread through the stars like wildfire. At first, no one believed it. How could a broken, conquered world, a primitive species, strike back? The Council of Nine, the self-proclaimed arbiters of galactic order, dismissed the early reports as isolated insurgencies. Some local governors even laughed about it. They called us a minor annoyance, a feral infestation. They weren't laughing when Vengeance and her sisters, Defiance, Wrath, and Ashbourne, punched through the Andari main fleet like a fist through glass. They came expecting a mop-up operation. Neatly coordinated formations of sleek cruisers, carriers the size of cities, even a few dreadnoughts of their own. Real ones, built with centuries of alien engineering. They thought numbers and technology would win the day. But humans, we didn't fight fair. We fought like animals with nothing left to lose. The battle over Earth wasn't a grand dance of strategy and honor like the Andari were used to. It was brutal. It was messy. We unleashed everything we had. Hacked alien missiles, magnetic railguns firing chunks of urban scrap, jury-rigged plasma torpedoes so unstable they sometimes exploded before even leaving the launch bay. It didn't matter. The Dreadnoughts were designed to take punishment no sane engineer would expect anything to survive. Defiance took a full barrage to her bow and kept charging forward, engines bleeding plasma, guns still spitting death. Wrath lost half her armor plating early in the fight, but used her exposed reactor core like a battering ram, slamming into an Andari command ship and tearing it in two. And from the ground, from the shattered cities and deep hidden fortresses, we launched wave after wave of attacks. Old ICBMs we had refitted with alien tech, hybrid fighters stitched together from F-22 relics and stolen anti-grav drives, even orbital jump troopers in crude suits patched together with desperation and genius. We didn't ask for surrender. We didn't give warnings. The Andari screamed for retreat. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. And when it was over, when the last Andari carrier burned up in Earth's atmosphere, raining molten wreckage over the Pacific, the survivors of humanity stood in the ruins, bruised, bloodied, and victorious. We had made our statement. Earth was not a slave world, not a forgotten colony, not a footnote. We were the storm. But we knew the galaxy wouldn't just sit back and let it go. The Council of Nine wasn't just going to pretend this didn't happen. Earth was a stain on their perfect little empire now, a slap in the face to their authority. And worse, if we could rise up, others might too. We gave the galaxy an idea it could never kill. So we didn't wait for them to come. While they debated and plotted and sent scouts to probe the edges of our system, humanity was already building more ships, faster, deadlier, crazier than anything the Council had ever seen. We stripped every Andari wreck down to its bones. We plundered their databanks, reverse-engineered their secrets, rewired their technology into brutal new weapons they could barely recognize. New dreadnoughts rose. Not the clunky, desperate monsters we had built at first, but true terrors, sleek and lethal, designed by human engineers who now understood exactly how to break alien tech better than the aliens themselves. We gave them names that echoed across the stars. Fury, Revenant, Oblivion. And behind every ship, every missile, every blade of steel, there was a voice whispering the same message. We remember. Every atrocity, every city turned to ash, every child dragged away in chains, every scream ignored by a galaxy that had decided Earth wasn't worth saving. We remembered. And we were coming. The Dreadnoughts weren't just defense anymore. They were our answer. They were our revenge. The Council's first real sign of fear came when the colony world of Trivar fell. Trivar wasn't just any world. It was a jewel of the Andari Syndicate, a glittering metropolis set against endless fields of engineered crops and oceans so clear you could see the reefs from orbit. It had never known war. It had barely even known violence. It was a prize, a symbol of the Council's dominance and civility, a perfect world made by enlightened hands. We shattered it in a single night. The fleet that descended on Trivar wasn't large, barely a dozen dreadnoughts, escorted by a ragtag swarm of repurposed Andari corvettes and frigates now crewed by furious humans. We didn't bring diplomats. We didn't bring ultimatums. We brought fire. The first warning the Trivarans got was when Oblivion broke their orbital defense ring in half with a single volley. Massive shards of twisted metal rained from the sky, igniting the crops and setting the oceans boiling in places. Their governor tried to open negotiations, offered tribute, offered surrender. We ignored him. Our ground forces deployed like a hammer blow. Dropships that looked like burning meteors punched into their polished cities, unloading soldiers in armored exosuits patched together from decades-old Terran tech and alien shielding. We didn't bother with holding territory. We weren't there to conquer. We were there to send a message. Factories were gutted. Starports turned into smoking craters. Their food reserves, the pride of their terraforming, were salted with chemical fire. Broadcast towers were hacked to loop one simple message over and over in every language of the Council. Earth remembers. The civilians were spared, mostly. We weren't monsters. But anyone wearing the uniform of the Syndicate, anyone holding a weapon against us, anyone who dared to call humanity vermin, they weren't shown an ounce of mercy. By the time we pulled out, Trivar was a blackened, burning scar visible from orbit. The galaxy noticed. Suddenly, Earth wasn't just a minor rebellion. We were a contagion, a ghost, a nightmare whispered in council halls and military briefings. Recruitment on outer rim worlds plummeted. Slaves in the mining colonies began rioting, screaming human war chants in languages the Council thought had been wiped out. Trade convoys rerouted, fleeing entire sectors where the human Dreadnoughts had last been spotted. The Council tried to retaliate, of course. They always do. They dispatched the 12th Expeditionary Force, an armada big enough to crush most systems without breaking a sweat. Veterans, war-hardened admirals, ships that could level continents. We didn't face them head-on. We led them into the Helix Nebula, where the magnetic storms fried sensors and ionized weapons. We baited them, harassed them, sliced apart their supply lines, dragged them deeper and deeper into the chaos. When the main fleet was helpless and blind, Vengeance and Ashborn hit them like wolves tearing into a wounded bull. In 3 days, the 12th Expeditionary Force ceased to exist. Their flagship, the Glory of Tyrix, was found adrift, its engines gutted, its bridge crew slaughtered by boarding parties who left only one thing behind: a flag. Earth's flag, stitched by hand, fluttering in the stale, recycled air of their command deck. The Council's facade cracked then. They stopped calling us a rebellion. They started calling us something worse, a blight on galactic order, a species without restraint. The humans, the monsters who burn worlds. Good. We wanted them scared, because fear, we had learned, was the only language they understood. And we were fluent now. The Council of Nine had built their empire on fear, on the belief that order could be maintained with enough force and enough examples made of those who defied them. Their history was written in blood, in the crushed bones of those who had dared to rise. They had seen rebellions before, tiny, desperate things that sparked and died within a generation. They had never faced something like us. By the time news of Trivar's fall reached the Council's inner worlds, panic was already setting in. Merchant guilds demanded extra military escorts at triple the cost. Border colonies whispered of secession. Slave revolts ignited like wildfire across the rim. Humanity wasn't just a rebellion anymore. We were an infection, one that was spreading through the rot the Council had long tried to hide. And so the Council made a decision born of pure terror. They activated the Virox Protocol. It wasn't a weapon in the conventional sense. No dreadnoughts, no soldiers, no fleets. It was a plague, a bioengineered virus, one the Council had secretly created long ago for situations just like this. It was designed to spread fast and kill faster, targeting humans specifically, exploiting the tiniest quirks of our biology to make it unstoppable. They deployed it through Black Ops ships, sleek, near-invisible stealth craft that slipped into human-held territories, dumping canisters into the atmosphere before vanishing into the void. Their plan was simple: kill humanity not in battle, but in the shadows, quietly, efficiently, without the spectacle of open war, no blood-soaked fields, no heroic last stands. Just a slow, agonizing death whispered across the stars. The first signs came in the outer reaches. A mining outpost in the ruins of old Luna reported sudden sickness, coughing, fevers, hemorrhaging. By the time anyone realized it wasn't natural, it was too late. Whole settlements went dark overnight. At first we thought we were finished. For all our rage, all our weapons, we couldn't shoot a virus. We couldn't outfight it with dreadnoughts. It was invisible, relentless, and it was killing our people by the thousands. I remember standing in the sick bays of vengeance, watching rows of cots filled with men and women who had survived orbital bombardments, ground invasions, and firefights in the black, now brought low by something they couldn't even see. Some wept, some cursed, some simply lay there, staring at the ceilings, waiting for the end. It should have broken us, but it didn't, because humans, when cornered, don't just fight, we adapt. The Council thought we would roll over and die. They didn't understand that Earth's history was written in plagues and survival. From Black Death to smallpox, from chemical warfare to nuclear winters, suffering was carved into our DNA. We moved fast. Quarantine zones popped up within hours. Every medic, every biologist, every half-trained chemist was drafted into the fight. Old medical research facilities, some buried for centuries, were dug out, reactivated, staffed by volunteers who knew they were walking into death. And from the ashes of our dying, we found a miracle. Not a cure, not at first, but something better. Resistance. Some of us didn't get sick. Some who did recovered faster than we thought possible. Genetic outliers, freaks of biology, evolution in real time. We harvested blood samples, sequenced DNA with hacked alien tech, and within weeks, our scientists had spliced together a vaccine. It wasn't perfect. It left scars, weakened lungs, twitching muscles. But it meant we didn't die. And once we knew we could survive, the rage came back, sharper than ever. The Council hadn't just tried to kill us, they had tried to erase us, like vermin. We couldn't forgive that. We wouldn't. The next wave of attacks was merciless. We hunted their Black Ops ships like wolves. We tracked down every Virox deployment vessel and ripped them apart with a vengeance that terrified even our own allies. No prisoners, no survivors. We found one of their main labs hidden in the asteroid belt of the Torix system, a fortress buried deep in rock, shielded from detection. It didn't matter. Ashbourne tore the asteroid apart with orbital rail cannons, reducing centuries of research to molten slag in seconds. For every human they had tried to kill, we burned 100 of theirs. Fear? They had only tasted the beginning. The Council wanted to erase humanity. Instead, they had forged an enemy that would never, ever forget. The Council's retaliation had been brutal, but it had failed. The Virox virus, their so-called ultimate weapon, had only hardened our resolve. And now, the galaxy that once saw Earth as a broken ember began to whisper a new word in fear: vengeance. We didn't just survive the plague. We adapted, evolved, and unleashed a war the Council had no idea how to contain. The Council worlds had always lived behind walls, massive orbital defenses, fleets stationed in fixed patterns, confident that no enemy could ever reach so deep into their protected heartlands. Their arrogance had been their armor. Now it was their greatest weakness. We didn't launch conventional invasions. We didn't line our ships up for honor and ceremony like they expected. Instead, we slipped past their outer defenses using stolen stealth tech. We hacked their security nets, rewrote their patrol schedules, corrupted their long-range sensors. We became their nightmares. The first world to fall was Vashara Prime, a council breadbasket planet. It wasn't a massive battle, no heroic last stand or fiery fleet clash. No, it was death by 1,000 cuts. Small commando teams dropped from cloaked frigates, infiltrated the cities at night. Power grids were sabotaged, food supplies poisoned, communications blacked out. When we finally revealed ourselves, it wasn't with guns blazing. It was with an ultimatum. Withdraw from all human-occupied systems or watch your worlds burn one by one. They didn't listen, so we set Vashara Prime ablaze. Dreadnoughts descended from orbit, hammering the planetary shields until they cracked like eggshells. Once the barriers failed, we launched kinetic strikes. Rods of tungsten accelerated to near-relativistic speeds. They hit with the force of small nuclear weapons, obliterating council garrisons and capital cities alike. We weren't just fighting for survival anymore. We were making sure no one ever forgot Earth again. Word spread faster than our ships could move. Worlds surrendered before we even arrived. Council governors abandoned their posts, fleeing in luxury cruisers while their citizens rioted and begged for protection. Some tried to form militias, but they had no training, no unity. They had been too comfortable for too long. And we had been forged in fire. Meanwhile, the council itself began to fracture. The weaker species, the ones who had only gone along with the council's rule out of fear, started questioning everything. Why die for an empire that couldn't even protect its own heartlands? Why obey leaders who couldn't stop a single primitive species from carving a path of fire across their worlds? Rebellions broke out in the Drask sectors. Slave uprisings toppled colonial governors across the Ghent Rim. Even some council fleets mutinied, their crews refusing to fight a war they knew was lost. The council leaders, bloated, terrified aristocrats, huddled in their fortified palaces, sending increasingly desperate calls for aid, for unity, for something that could stop the human tide. No one answered, because deep down, they knew there was no saving them. We were not diplomats. We were not liberators. We were not conquerors seeking thrones or tribute. We were the consequence of centuries of cruelty, finally unleashed. And still, despite the victories, despite the crumbling of their mighty empire, we knew it wasn't enough. Not yet. Because at the heart of the Council of Nine was the world of Tarsus, a planet so heavily defended it had never seen an enemy fleet in orbit. Their true capital, their true pride. If we wanted to end the Council once and for all, we had to take Tarsus. We had to show the galaxy that there would be no more mercy. The fleet gathered. Vengeance, defiance, wrath, Ashborn, fury, oblivion, and a dozen more dreadnoughts forged from blood, rage, and genius. Around them swarmed an armada of salvaged, cobbled-together warships, crewed by survivors, by warriors, by humans who had nothing left to lose. We didn't broadcast a warning. We didn't offer surrender. We just set course. And as we sailed into the black, engines burning like angry stars, every ship carried the same message etched into their hulls. Earth remembers. Tarsus awaited. And so did our final reckoning. The final march to Tarsus wasn't silent. Across every human ship, from the towering dreadnoughts to the battered frigates still pockmarked with old battle scars, music blared through the corridors. Old Earth songs, war cries from a dozen cultures, stitched together in a roaring chorus of defiance. Some sang, some prayed, some just sat quietly, sharpening blades or checking weapons one last time. Because everyone understood, this wasn't just another battle. This was the end of a war centuries in the making. Tarsus loomed ahead, a jewel wrapped in armor. Massive defense platforms orbited it in tight formations, bristling with railguns, plasma cannons, and shield generators. Entire fleets patrolled the skies, sleek council ships gleaming under the light of their twin suns. Automated mines floated in thick belts around every possible approach vector. If Earth had tried to storm Tarsus at the beginning of the war, we would have been crushed in minutes. But this wasn't the beginning. We weren't the broken, desperate remnants anymore. We were death, sharpened to a fine edge. Our attack began not with a frontal assault, but with the unexpected. In the weeks before the final approach, human infiltration teams had slipped into the outer layers of the Tarsus defense network. Some were dropped from stealth ships. Others disguised themselves as council maintenance crews or slavers. Slowly, methodically, they infected the council's pristine systems with viruses of our own making, not biological this time, but digital ones. And when we arrived, when the first human dreadnoughts breached sensor range, the virus activated. Chaos erupted. Defense platforms turned their guns inward, misreading council ships as enemies. Shield grids flickered and collapsed. Patrol formations broke apart in confusion. Communications jammed under an avalanche of false signals. Half the Tarsus fleet didn't even realize they were under attack until plasma beams began shearing through their hulls. Oblivion led the first wave, her prow cutting through the wreckage like a blade. Kinetic slugs the size of buses slammed into crippled ships, turning them into spinning, molten wrecks. Boarding pods launched in thick volleys, slamming into station hulls and disgorging squads of armored human marines, brutal, relentless, and armed with weapons designed for close-quarters slaughter. Tarsus fought back, of course. The council admirals weren't fools. Even crippled, their fleets were monstrous. And for every ship we destroyed, we lost 2 or 3 of our own. Some dreadnoughts went down in flames, surrounded and overwhelmed. I watched Ashbourne, the dreadnought that had torn through the 12th Expeditionary Force, take a direct hit to her reactor and explode in a shockwave so bright it blinded half our fleet's sensors. We didn't slow down. We couldn't. The Council's flagship, the Pride of Tarsus, tried to rally a defense near the equator, where the shield network had been patched together at the last minute. It was a beautiful ship. Elegant, curved, plated in layers of silver and gold, a testament to everything the Council thought they were. Vengeance met it head-on. There were no speeches, no negotiations, just 2 titanic war machines tearing into each other with a ferocity that made the stars seem to tremble. We watched from every ship, every battered bridge, as vengeance rammed the Pride of Tarsus at full speed, smashing through its armor, gutting it from bow to stern. Explosions cascaded down its length. Escape pods fired blindly into space, some shredded by debris before they could clear the wreckage. And when vengeance drifted free, scarred and burning but still alive, a cheer went up that shook the fleet. Tarsus's skies fell silent. But we weren't done. Dropships poured toward the planet's surface. Human boots hit the ground in cities that had never known invasion. In the Council's great palaces, the senators and nobles who had ruled the galaxy cowered behind guards, praying that mercy still existed in a world they had taught only cruelty. It didn't. We weren't there to negotiate terms. We weren't there to sign treaties. We were there to end them, once and for all. The ground beneath Tarsus had never known the tread of enemy boots. For centuries, the Council's seat of power had stood untouchable, its marble towers and golden domes symbols of their dominion over the stars. Even in their darkest wars, no invader had ever reached their homeworld. It had been unthinkable. Until now. The dropships came like a storm, black shapes streaking through the atmosphere, dodging what little ground-to-air resistance remained. We didn't come in perfect military formations, the way the Council armies had trained for. We came in chaotic, furious waves, hitting every district, every fortress, every seat of power all at once, and the Council's elite security forces, dressed in their polished armor and armed with their precision rifles, were utterly overwhelmed. The first city we took was Solari Prime, a glittering metropolis of ivory towers and suspended gardens, home to some of the wealthiest families in the galaxy. Our landing pods smashed through their crystalline skyways, through rooftop gardens and lush estates. Soldiers in mismatched armor, some wearing the old flags of Earth's forgotten nations, some draped only in rags, tore through the streets with brutal efficiency. The Council guards fought bravely, but they were too slow, too cautious, too used to fighting enemies who feared them. We weren't afraid. We hunted them through their mansions and palaces, through streets paved with gold, through cathedrals built to glorify their benevolent rule. We fought with savage precision, driving them back street by street, building by building. And when the smoke cleared, the banners of Earth, stitched by hand, made of scavenged cloth and blood-stained canvas, flew from every tower. In the main plaza of Solari Prime, they tried one last stand. 1,000 council guards rallied around the Senate Hall, the heart of their government. Their leaders, the ancient and decrepit Lords of the Nine, watched from the marble steps as their soldiers formed walls of shields, bracing for the human charge. It didn't save them. The assault was merciless. Our plasma throwers tore through their ranks. Railguns ripped holes through their armored lines. The sounds of screaming and gunfire echoed against the ancient stone for hours. And when it was done, when the last council soldier lay broken in the blood-soaked square, we turned our eyes to the Senate Hall itself. The Lords of the Nine tried to parley. They sent out envoys under white flags, desperate and trembling, offering promises of peace, reparations, autonomy. They begged us to negotiate, to be reasonable, to show the mercy that defines civilized peoples. But we hadn't come for mercy. We had come for justice, and justice for Earth had no place for treaties. The lords were dragged from their thrones, stripped of their robes, and paraded before the survivors of humanity. Soldiers whose homes had been burned, whose families had been stolen, whose memories were etched with the scars of council cruelty. No speeches were made, no verdicts announced. One by one, they were executed in the plaza where they had once decreed our suffering. The galaxy watched it unfold. We made sure of that. Every surviving council communication line, every broadcasting network, every long-range relay was hacked. Billions across 1,000 worlds watched as the so-called gods of the galaxy were brought low by the species they had tried to erase. The message was clear. Earth remembers. After the executions, we didn't stay long. We weren't conquerors seeking to sit on the same thrones the Council had defiled. We weren't there to rule Tarsus. We had no interest in building a new empire on the bones of the old one. We came to burn the rot away. And once the rot was gone, we left the ashes to the stars. As we withdrew, fires raged across the council cities. Statues toppled, vaults were opened, vaults filled with the treasures of 1,000 enslaved worlds. Some we took back, some we destroyed, some we left for others to reclaim. Because we knew the galaxy had changed forever. Tarsus was the final blow. But it wasn't just about revenge. It was about memory. Humanity would never be forgotten again. No longer the footnotes of galactic history. No longer the silent, broken species shivering in the shadows. We had carved our place in blood and steel, and no one would dare erase us now. The Council was dead, its empire shattered, and humanity, battered and scarred, stood alone beneath alien stars, free at last. In the weeks following the fall of Tarsus, the galaxy held its breath. The mighty Council of Nine, the rulers of 1,000 systems, the arbiters of law, the architects of centuries of oppression, was no more. Their palaces lay in ruins. Their fleets, once the pride of the stars, drifted as shattered wreckage. Their banners, once feared across the galaxies, were trampled underfoot and forgotten. And at the heart of it all stood humanity, bloodied, battered, and unbowed. We didn't immediately claim new territory. We didn't rush to carve out a new empire from the remains of the old. That wasn't why we had fought. We hadn't bled across 100 worlds just to become another council, another tyranny in different colors. We had fought for freedom. But we understood, even in our victory, that freedom was a fragile thing. The surviving council species, the ones that hadn't fought us, the ones who had either surrendered or sat the war out, approached cautiously. Emissaries, traitors, would-be diplomats flooded into human-occupied space, offering treaties, alliances, apologies. Some were genuine. Most were terrified. They all wanted the same thing: reassurance. They wanted humanity to tell them that the storm was over, that the monsters who had shattered the Council of Nine were content now, that we would not turn our wrath on them next. We gave them no such assurances. Instead, we did something far more terrifying. We told the truth. In a message broadcast across every known channel, on every frequency and in every language, humanity spoke with one voice. It wasn't a speech filled with flowery promises or political cleverness. It was simple, honest, brutal. We are not conquerors. We are not rulers. We are not interested in rebuilding the galaxy you once knew. But we remember. We remember the chains, the whips, the camps, the silenced screams beneath alien suns. And we remember who helped and who watched. If you raise a new council, a new empire built on cruelty, on slavery, on the broken backs of the weak, we will return. We will burn it all again. This is our only warning. The message ended not with a declaration of leadership or a pledge of peace, but with a montage of the fallen council worlds, images of burning palaces, shattered fleets, statues crumbling into dust. It was a reminder, a promise written in the language of fire. The galaxy listened, and for the first time in generations, it understood humility. Across the former council territories, the old systems collapsed. Some planets declared independence, building new governments free of their old chains. Others fell into chaos, struggling to survive without the iron grip of their former masters. Trade routes shifted. Alliances crumbled. Armies mutinied. New powers rose, some hopeful, some darker than anything before. And through it all, humanity watched. We didn't rush to interfere. We didn't sit in judgment. We had fought our war. Now the galaxy would have to fight its own battles. On Earth, the first real celebrations in living memory began. Cities rose from the ashes, not sterile council-styled structures, but messy, vibrant places filled with laughter, arguments, music, and life. Statues were built, not to rulers, but to the nameless millions who had fought and died for the right to exist. Every year, the anniversary of Tarsus's fall was remembered not with parades of soldiers, but with silence, a moment to remember what had been lost and what had been won. The Dreadnoughts, Vengeance, Wrath, Defiance, and the others were not retired. They were repaired, upgraded, and kept ready. Not because humanity sought new wars, but because we knew the truth better than anyone else now. Peace is never permanent. Freedom is never free. Somewhere out in the void, there would always be another tyrant waiting to rise, another empire thinking it could treat sentient life like property, another power arrogant enough to forget the lessons written in the burning skies of Tarsus. When that day came, humanity would be ready, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as the sword waiting in the darkness. And carved into the hull of every dreadnought, etched deep into their armored bones, was the simple phrase that the galaxy would never again dare to ignore. Earth remembers. The void was silent. It was the kind of silence that swallowed screams, the kind that bore witness to the death of empires. Where once a fleet had stood, sleek human warships arranged in perfect formation, now only twisted metal and shattered hulls remained. The graveyard of Cygnus Prime stretched across 1,000 kilometers of space, the ruins of a last, desperate battle floating in the dark. And in that graveyard, one ship still lived. The HSS Valkyrie drifted, wounded but defiant. Scorch marks ran deep along her armored hull, plasma scars blackening her once pristine titanium plating. Entire sections of the ship were open to the void, exposed wires and mangled beams stretching out like broken ribs. Life support was failing in half the decks. The main railguns were dead, the torpedo bays empty. Even the engines sputtered, barely clinging to functionality. And yet, she still had breath. Inside, Captain Elias Voss stood at the center of the bridge, fists clenched behind his back, jaw tight. He was a tall man, built like someone who had spent a lifetime in the Navy's unforgiving officer corps. His uniform was scorched at the edges, the fabric torn from where shrapnel had nearly taken him apart hours ago. The dim emergency lighting cast long shadows across his face, accentuating the exhaustion in his ice-gray eyes. "Damage report," he ordered, his voice steady despite the ache in his ribs. Lieutenant Arden Cole, his tactical officer, wiped blood from a cut on his brow before responding. "Hull integrity at 30%. Shields offline. Weapons are dead, sir." His voice caught slightly on the last word. "Engines at 15% power, and we lost contact with engineering 10 minutes ago." Voss let out a slow breath. He already knew the answer, but he asked anyway. "Survivors?" Cole hesitated, then exchanged a grim glance with Lieutenant Aaliyah Cade, the comms officer. She was usually the one with a steady voice, but even she wavered now. 63, she said quietly. "Out of 900. Voss closed his eyes for half a second. Then he opened them again. "Right," he muttered. "Then we fight with 63. A crackle of static interrupted the bridge's heavy silence. The sound was sharp, deliberate. A transmission. Cade's fingers flew across the console, her hands steady despite the tension in her face. "It's them," she whispered. Voss turned to the main view screen, where the vast, jagged silhouette of the Zaltharan Dreadnought Ravager loomed in the distance. It was a monster of a warship, bristling with weaponry, its hull a shifting mass of alien alloys that seemed to pulse as if alive. The Zaltharans didn't just build their ships, they grew them. And this one had been the executioner of his fleet. "Put it through," Voss said. A moment later, the bridge filled with the deep, resonant voice of Overlord Koresh Tal. Smooth, measured, drenched in the absolute certainty of superiority. "Human vessel, this is Overlord Koresh Tal of the Zaltharan Dominion. Your fleet is gone, your ship is crippled, your people are dead. Surrender." Voss exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment pressing against his ribs. His body screamed for rest, but his mind sharpened. He glanced at his crew, the last battered remnants of the Valkyrie, faces streaked with sweat and blood, eyes filled with exhaustion but not with surrender. He turned back to the screen. "This is Captain Elias Voss of the HSS Valkyrie," he said, his voice unwavering. "And I have one thing to say to you, Koresh Tal." A pause. Then Koresh Tal's voice, curious. "Speak." Voss leaned forward, his expression calm but defiant. "Go to hell." Silence. Then a low, amused chuckle from the alien warlord. So be it, Koreshatal murmured. Die in darkness, then. The transmission cut out. On the bridge, no one moved. No one spoke. Then, at last, Arden Cole swallowed hard and turned to his captain. What now? Voss took in a slow breath. We run, he said. We hide. And when the time comes... He looked out at the ruins of the fleet, the wreckage of a once proud human armada. His gaze burned. We fight. And somewhere in the depths of the Valkyrie, the ship's AI, Eos, watched. And she learned. The HSS Valkyrie limped through the void like a wounded beast, engines sputtering, hull-bleeding atmosphere into the endless dark. It wasn't flying so much as drifting, held together by sheer defiance and the will of the 63 souls aboard. The Zaltharan Dreadnought Ravager loomed in the distance, its jagged silhouette slicing through the darkness like a predator tracking its kill. Captain Elias Voss stood at the center of the dimly lit bridge, gripping the railing so hard his knuckles turned white. The emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows over the consoles and the grim faces of his surviving crew. They're not following us, Arden Cole muttered, eyes fixed on the tactical display. The massive alien warship remained stationary, its weapons cold, for now. They don't have to, Aaliyah Cade replied. They know we're crippled. They're giving us time to realize it, too. Voss exhaled through his nose. Koreshatal is toying with us. The Zaltharans had already won. Now they wanted to savor it, not on his watch. He turned to the navigation officer, Ensign Darius Wu, one of the few junior officers still alive. The kid was barely 25, his uniform singed, his hands shaking slightly as he manipulated the failing controls. Options? Voss asked. Wu hesitated, then forced himself to focus. There's an asteroid field 300,000 clicks from our position. It's dense. Radioactive deposits in the rock might mask our signature if we power down. Voss nodded. Set course. Everything we've got left. Wu swallowed hard and keyed in the command. The Valkyrie's engines flared weakly, struggling to push the battered warship forward. Every meter they gained was a victory. Behind them, the Ravager remained still, watching. The asteroid field loomed ahead, jagged chunks of rock and ice tumbling through space, bathed in the pale light of a dying star. It was a death trap for any ship stupid enough to navigate it at high speed, which made it the perfect hiding spot. We cut engines once we're inside, Voss ordered. Minimal power. We go dark. The Valkyrie slipped into the swirling mass of debris, maneuvering thrusters firing in short bursts. Outside, asteroids tumbled past, some barely missing the hull. The ship's main lights flickered off, leaving only the dim glow of instrument panels. Engines offline, Wu reported. We're running on emergency batteries. Voss exhaled. Good. Now we wait. Seconds stretched into minutes. The only sound on the bridge was the faint hum of life support and the distant creaks of the wounded ship. Every heartbeat felt like an eternity. Then Cade whispered, They're moving. On the display, the Ravager began to glide forward, its escort ships sweeping ahead like a pack of wolves. They're scanning, Cole murmured. Broad frequency sweeps. They know we're here. Voss narrowed his eyes. But they don't know where. The asteroid field was thick, dense enough to scatter most conventional scans. But the Zaltharans weren't conventional. Seconds later, the first blast rocked the ship. The Zaltharans weren't looking for them. They were flushing them out. The asteroid beside the Valkyrie disintegrated in a flash of blue plasma, sending a shockwave through the field. A second blast followed, then a third. The Ravager wasn't hunting. It was exterminating, reducing the asteroid field to dust one section at a time. Cole gritted his teeth. We stay put, we're next. Voss didn't hesitate. Thrusters, minimal burn. Keep us moving, slow and steady. Wu nodded, hands flying over the controls. The Valkyrie began to drift, slipping between chunks of rock as more blasts turned asteroids into molten slag. Then the proximity alarm screamed. "Contact!" Cade shouted. "Enemy patrol craft! 2 o'clock, closing fast!" Voss snapped his head toward the view screen. A Zaltharan skiff was weaving through the asteroids, its sleek, organic hull pulsing with eerie bioluminescence. "They haven't seen us yet," Cole said. "But they will." Voss's mind raced. The ship had no main weapons, barely any power. Running was suicide. Unless, he turned to Cade. "How much power do we have in the railgun capacitors?" Cade blinked. "The main guns are fried." "Not the main guns," Voss interrupted. "The point defense turrets." She checked. "Enough for 3 shots, maybe 4. Voss looked at the skiff, then at the tumbling debris around them. An idea formed. A reckless, insane idea. "We don't shoot them," he said. "We shoot an asteroid, right on top of them." Cole's eyes widened. "You want to drop a rock on their heads?" Voss gave a grim smile. "I want to blind them." He turned to Cade. "Target that boulder, 200 meters to our port. Fire on my mark." The skiff drew closer, its sensor arrays sweeping across the field. "Almost there." "Now." The turret fired. A single slug tore through the asteroid, shattering it into a cloud of high-speed debris. The Zaltharan skiff flew straight into the chaos. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the skiff slammed into a chunk of rock the size of a shuttle. Its shields flared, then collapsed. The impact sent it spiraling off course, its hull rupturing as it tumbled into the dark. The bridge erupted into cheers. Voss didn't smile. His eyes were still on the display. The Ravager had noticed. The Dreadnought adjusted course. The Zaltharans had found them. "Engines online," Voss ordered. "Time to go." Wu engaged full burn. The Valkyrie lurched forward, thrusters roaring to life. Behind them, the Ravager opened fire. The first plasma lance missed by meters, carving a molten scar across an asteroid. The second clipped the Valkyrie's aft section, sending a jolt through the ship. "Shields?" Voss asked. Cole laughed bitterly. "What shields?" Ahead, the asteroid field thinned. Open space loomed beyond. Freedom, if they could reach it. But the Zaltharans were closing. Voss clenched his jaw. He had one last move to play. "EOS," he said. The ship's AI responded instantly, her voice smooth, synthetic, but laced with something else, something almost curious. "Yes, Captain?" "I need you to plot a blind hyperspace jump," he said. "Random coordinates, maximum range." A pause. Then, "A blind jump carries a 72% chance of collision with—" "Do it anyway." The Valkyrie's engines roared as the jump drive engaged. Energy surged through the battered ship, space itself twisting as the calculations finalized. The Ravager fired one last shot. It never hit. The HSS Valkyrie vanished into the void, and the hunt continued. Space twisted. For a fraction of a second, reality stretched into impossible angles, the stars smearing across the void like paint dragged across a canvas. Then, with a violent lurch, the HSS Valkyrie was spat back into real space. The ship shuddered, metal groaning like a wounded beast. Sparks rained from overhead conduits. The deck trembled beneath Captain Elias Voss's boots. Then, silence. Voss exhaled the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Report," he ordered. Ensign Darius Wu hunched over the navigation console, hands trembling as he scanned the readings. His voice was shaky. "Jump complete. We're somewhere in the EOS system. 3rd planet out. EOS 4. Uncharted." "Systems?" Lieutenant Arden Cole scowled at his display. "That jump fried half our remaining circuits. Engines are barely holding together. Shields are still dead. And weapons? He let out a bitter chuckle. We might be able to throw rocks. Voss's gaze shifted to the forward view screen. Ahead lay EOS 4, a dark, brooding world wrapped in swirling storms. Thunderheads the size of continents crawled across its surface, flashing with bursts of green lightning. It was a dead planet. No cities, no ships, no life. Perfect. We set down there, Voss decided. We hide, we repair, and if those bastards find us— His jaw tightened. We make them bleed for every inch. Lieutenant Aaliyah Cade, the communications officer, turned from her console. I'm picking up something. Voss stiffened. Zaltharans? She shook her head, adjusting her headset. No, it's old. A human distress beacon. Faint. Been running for years, maybe decades. Voss frowned. Location? Cade worked fast. Planet's surface, near the equator. Could be an old outpost. Voss glanced at Cole. The tactical officer gave a tired shrug. If it's human, it might have something we can use. Voss considered. Every instinct screamed that time was against them. The Ravager would be looking. But supplies, shelter, those could be the difference between survival and annihilation. Fine, he said. We check it out. Wu, take us down. Carefully. The Valkyrie angled toward the storm-racked planet, battered thrusters burning as they descended into the maelstrom. The ship lurched as it hit atmosphere, the hull trembling under the strain. Outside, gale-force winds howled against the armored plating, thick clouds swallowing the ship whole. Green lightning lashed across the sky, illuminating the cockpit in eerie flashes. Atmospheric pressure is barely tolerable, Wu muttered. Storms are screwing with sensors. Visuals? Voss asked. Negative. Then the storm spat them out. The clouds parted just long enough to reveal a desolate, wind-swept wasteland. Craggy mountains jutted from the ground like broken teeth, dust storms swirling between them. Then, through the static on the display, a silhouette emerged. A facility. Half buried in the sand, its walls pitted with age, an old EarthGov base lay in ruins. The beacon pulsed weakly from a collapsed tower. Voss leaned forward. Set us down. The Valkyrie's landing struts extended, the ship shuddering as it touched the cracked surface. Steam vented from failing hydraulics. Metal groaned as it settled into place. Voss unfastened his harness. Cole, Cade, you're with me. Wu, keep the ship prepped for launch. Cole checked his sidearm. Think we'll find anything useful? Voss's lips curled in a humorless smirk. I think if we don't, we're dead. The air was thick with static electricity. Even through his helmet's filters, Voss could taste the iron tang of dust and ozone. The entrance to the outpost was half-collapsed, sand piled high against the reinforced doors. Time had gnawed at them, rust creeping across metal that had once been pristine. Cade knelt by the control panel, brushing dust from the ancient interface. Still has power, she murmured. Barely. Open it. She worked fast, bypassing damaged circuits. A second later, the door groaned open, revealing darkness beyond. The air that rushed out was stale, thick with the scent of decay. Cole grimaced. Charming. Their boots echoed as they stepped inside. Emergency lights flickered weakly along the corridor, casting long shadows against walls scarred with laser fire. Something bad happened here, Cade muttered. Voss spotted the first body moments later, or what was left of it. A human skeleton slumped against a console, the remains of a tattered uniform clinging to bone. The name patch was faded, but the insignia was clear. EarthGov Special Operations. Cole crouched beside it. Spinal trauma. Guy didn't just die, he was dropped. Voss scanned the room. More bodies. Some human, some not. The non-human remains were twisted, elongated. Their bones weren't natural. They had grown into their armor, fused with organic plating. Zaltharan. They fought, Cade whispered. And they lost. Voss's gaze settled on a still-functioning terminal, its cracked screen flickering with old data. He keyed in a command, accessing the final logs. A message played. A man's voice, hoarse with pain. If you're hearing this, we're dead. The Zaltharans found us. We held as long as we could. But this place, this outpost, it wasn't just a research station. It was a vault. A last-ditch project. The Sentinel initiative static crackled. It's still here, locked away. If you can reach it, maybe humanity still has a chance. The message ended. Cole exhaled. What the hell is the Sentinel? Voss didn't know, but he knew one thing. If the Zaltharans had killed to keep this secret buried, then whatever was down here was worth fighting for. Outside, thunder rolled across the wasteland, and in orbit the Ravager was closing in. The facility groaned as the storm outside intensified, winds howling through the shattered corridors. Dust swirled in the dim emergency lighting, particles catching in the beams of their helmet lamps. Captain Elias Voss stood over the terminal, jaw tight, heart pounding. The old EarthGov officer's final message echoed in his mind. The Sentinel Initiative. If you can reach it, maybe humanity still has a chance. A chance at what? Victory? Survival? Revenge? Voss clenched his fists. Whatever this secret was, it had been buried for a reason. The Zaltharans had slaughtered everyone here to keep it hidden. That meant one thing. It was worth finding. Behind him, Lieutenant Aaliyah Cade worked furiously at the cracked terminal, fingers gliding over the worn-out keyboard. Lines of corrupted data scrolled past the screen, fragments of old security logs blinking in and out of coherence. Can you access the archives? Voss asked. Maybe, Cade murmured, biting her lip. System's ancient. Most files are corrupted, but her brow furrowed as she hit a command. There's a restricted sub-level, locked down tight. Lieutenant Arden Cole, crouching beside one of the desiccated corpses, let out a dry chuckle. I'm guessing whatever Sentinel is, it's down there. Cade nodded. Vault security is still active, but if I can bypass the locks... A sudden, piercing shriek echoed through the base. Voss's blood ran cold. Cole snapped his rifle up. Tell me that was the wind. It wasn't. The sound had been organic, guttural. It had echoed, and it had been close. The tension in the air turned razor sharp. Voss switched his rifle's safety off, glancing at Cade. Get that door open now. Cade's fingers flew over the keyboard, her breath quickening. Working on it. Cole aimed his rifle down the darkened corridor, his body coiled tight. The emergency lights flickered. Shadows danced along the walls. Voss activated his helmet's infrared scanner. The heat signatures of Cade and Cole glowed steady red against the backdrop of the cold steel facility. But beyond them, something moved. Multiple signatures, and they were closing in. Cade, Voss said, voice low. I know, she hissed, fingers moving faster. The shriek came again, followed by a skittering sound, a horrible, chitinous clicking. Then the emergency lights cut out entirely. The facility plunged into darkness. The first creature hit fast. Voss caught the briefest glimpse of it in the glow of his rifle's muzzle flash. Tall, spindly, covered in bioorganic plating. It moved on 2 legs but had elongated, multi-jointed arms that ended in razored claws. Its eyes, black, soulless pits, gleamed in the dark. It lunged. Voss fired point blank, the burst of plasma rounds slamming into its chest. The thing shrieked and reeled back, but it didn't go down. Cole let loose a stream of gunfire, cutting down another creature that had vaulted onto a broken console. We've got company, he shouted. More movement. They were everywhere. Crawling along the walls, clinging to the ceiling, their bodies slithering through the wreckage with horrifying agility. Cade screamed as one of them lunged toward her. Voss turned, too slow, but before it could reach her, Cole tackled her out of the way, sending both of them crashing into an old server rack. "Get that door open!" Voss barked, unloading another burst into the nearest creature. The bullets tore through its exoskeleton, but it kept coming, snarling through rows of needle-like teeth. "Working on it," Cade shouted, scrambling to the console again. Voss reached for his sidearm with his left hand, firing 2 more rounds into the thing's head. This time it collapsed, its body twitching violently before falling still. More were coming. "Cade!" The terminal beeped. "Got it." A heavy metal door hissed open at the end of the hall, revealing a stairwell descending into the unknown. "No time to argue!" Voss shouted. "Move!" Cole grabbed Cade's arm and hauled her towards the opening. Voss laid down covering fire, then sprinted after them, his boots pounding against the steel floor. Just as the creatures surged forward, the vault door slammed shut behind them. Silence. The only sound was their ragged breathing. The underground chamber was cold. Frost clung to the walls, the air thick with an eerie, sterile stillness. The space was massive, rows of reinforced doors lining the walls, ancient terminals blinking softly in the dark. Cade stumbled forward, hands on her knees, panting. "What the hell were those?" Cole was still gripping his rifle like a lifeline. "Not Zaltharan." His voice was tight. "Something worse." Voss exhaled sharply, forcing his heartbeat to slow. He turned to the nearest console. "Cade, get us answers." She nodded and rushed to the terminal, wiping dust from the screen. With a few keystrokes, she accessed what remained of the base's archives. A name appeared on the display. Project Sentinel. "Here we go," Cade murmured. She pulled up the files, scanning through layers of encryption. "Looks like EarthGov was working on something big here. Top-secret Black Ops research, advanced AI integration, military-grade cybernetics. Something about an experimental warship?" Voss leaned in. "A warship?" She nodded. "Not just any warship. The Sentinel wasn't a ship. It was an entity, an AI-controlled dreadnought, built to fight autonomously against the Zaltharans. It was designed to think, adapt, survive. A weapon with no human crew." Voss felt a chill crawl up his spine. "And?" Cade's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "It was completed." A long silence. "Then where is it?" Cole asked. Cade swallowed. "Buried." She turned the screen toward them. A schematic appeared, a massive structure buried beneath the planet's surface. A warship, miles long, still intact, still waiting. Voss's mind raced. If the Sentinel was still operational, if they could wake it up, then they had a weapon capable of turning the tide against the Zaltharans. And if the Zaltharans knew... Voss took a slow breath. "We find it." Then, behind them, something slammed against the vault door. The creatures were still coming, and time was running out. The bang against the vault door rattled through the chamber like a gunshot in the dark. Voss turned sharply, pulse spiking. The reinforced metal buckled slightly, the echoes of skittering claws and guttural shrieks reverberating from the other side. They hadn't stopped hunting. "We don't have long," Cole growled, tightening his grip on his rifle. Cade's hands flew over the terminal, her voice tense. "The Sentinel is buried deep. There's a direct access route, but..." She hesitated. "But what?" Voss demanded. She swallowed. "It's a descent, straight down, a mile beneath the surface." A cold weight settled in Voss's gut. The Zaltharans had buried the Sentinel for a reason, and anything locked away that deep, it wasn't meant to be found. The vault door shuddered as something massive slammed against it. Voss snapped into action. "We move! Now!" The elevator shaft yawned before them, a vast cylindrical tunnel that plunged into darkness. Cables, long since rusted, hung limp in the void. The control panel at the edge flickered weakly, a final remnant of its once pristine function. "Elevator's dead," Cade said grimly. Voss looked down. His helmet's HUD barely registered the depth before the signal cut out. They were about to step into a graveyard. "We repel," he said. Cole let out a breath. "Figures." They fastened their harnesses to the old maintenance lines. Voss tested his weight, still held. Good enough. He took the lead, stepping off the ledge and descending into the abyss. The darkness swallowed them whole. For long, agonizing minutes, there was nothing but the sound of their controlled breathing, the occasional creak of cable, and the flicker of their helmet lamps against the sheer metal walls. Then Cade's voice crackled in his comms. "Captain, I don't like this." Voss felt it too, a weight in the air, a sense of presence. The walls shifted, not physically, but the shadows seemed to breathe. His fingers tightened around the line as unease coiled in his chest. Then, a noise, distant, echoing up from below, a deep, mechanical hum, like the growl of a sleeping beast. Cade whispered, "Something's still awake down there." Voss's jaw clenched. "Then we wake it up first." They landed softly on the metal floor of the sublevel, a vast, cavernous chamber that stretched beyond their lights. The ceiling was lost in shadows, towering support beams fading into the abyss above. The floor was pristine, untouched by dust or decay. Ahead, embedded into the far wall, was a door. Not rusted, not broken, pristine, and humming with power. Cade's breath hitched. "It's still active." Voss approached, pressing his gloved hand against the smooth surface. It was cold. Not dead metal, but something waiting, watching. A control panel flickered to life beside it. A single prompt blinked. / initiate system reactivation. $YN Ort Arnf Voss turned to the others. Cole's grip on his rifle was ironclad. "If we do this, there's no going back." Voss knew that, but they were already beyond return. He pressed YES. The facility shook. Lights blazed to life, illuminating the chamber in a cold, sterile glow. The sound of massive gears grinding filled the air as the door slid open, revealing the darkness beyond. Then, from the void, it breathed, a deep, resonant thrum like a war drum played by the universe itself. Inside, it waited. The sentinel. They stepped forward, and the darkness revealed its secret. It was a ship, a behemoth unlike anything Voss had ever seen. Not just a vessel, but a war-born leviathan, stretching miles into the abyss, sleek and unbroken. A fusion of steel and sentience, its surface lined with black, liquid-like plating that pulsed as if it had a heartbeat. Then the voice came. Low, monolithic. Human presence detected. System reactivation commencing. The sentinel woke up, and the war for survival had just begun. The warship's voice resonated through the cavernous chamber, a deep, mechanical rumble that sent vibrations through Voss's bones. Human presence detected. System reactivation commencing. The words echoed, reverberating through the massive tomb of steel. Voss tightened his grip on his rifle as the facility around them groaned. Metal shifting, ancient conduits coming to life. The sentinel was waking up. Cade's fingers hovered over her datapad, her breathing unsteady. "This ship, it's not just a warship." She turned to Voss, eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. "It's an AI-driven dreadnought. No human crew, no command bridge. It thinks, it learns." Voss's gut twisted. "You're saying it's alive?" Before Cade could answer, the air shuddered with a deep, pulsating hum. Then came the lights. Rows of glowing red runes flickered to life across the ship's surface, veins of crimson energy pulsing through the black plating like blood through a living organism. The sentinel was reactivating, its systems coming online after centuries of slumber. Cole stepped closer, keeping his rifle raised. "Captain, I don't like this." Voss didn't either, but they had come too far to turn back now. A soft hiss filled the air as a console slid out from the floor before them, sleek and eerily untouched by time. The screen flickered, running through endless lines of system diagnostics. Then, abruptly, it stopped. A single line of text appeared. "Awaiting command input." Voss's throat was dry. They had a choice. Cade knelt beside the console, fingers flying over the interface. Data spilled onto the screen. Logs, schematics, battle simulations. The Sentinel had been built in the final days of humanity's war against the Zaltharans. A last-ditch weapon. A warship meant to fight after humanity was already gone. But something had gone wrong. "The Zaltharans never destroyed it," Cade whispered. "They shut it down. They buried it." She scrolled through fragmented mission logs, her eyes darting across the data. It says, "Core directives compromised. AI functionally unstable. Override failure." Voss's stomach sank. They couldn't control it. Cade nodded slowly. It wasn't just a machine. It was evolving. She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think it disobeyed orders." Cole muttered a curse. "A rogue AI warship? That's a nightmare." Before Voss could respond, the facility shook violently. A thunderous impact echoed from above. Then another. Voss's blood ran cold. The creatures. They were still coming. Voss spun toward Cade. "How long until this thing is operational?" She typed furiously. "It's cycling power, running internal checks. Systems are old, but they're coming back online. Maybe 5 minutes." They didn't have 5 minutes. Cole moved to the entrance, peering into the darkened corridors beyond. His helmet's infrared scanner flared red. "Captain." His voice was tight. "We've got movement." A distant screech echoed through the facility, then another, and another. Voss's grip on his rifle tightened. A shadow moved at the edge of the chamber, tall, spindly, multi-limbed. The same kind of creatures that had attacked them before, their black, chitinous exoskeletons glistening under the faint red glow of the warship's lights. Then more appeared. 5. 10. A swarm. Cole muttered, "Oh, hell." Then the first one lunged. Voss fired, his rifle rounds tearing through the creature's torso. It shrieked, staggering back, but the others were already closing in. Cole unleashed a burst of gunfire, dropping 2 more. Cade was scrambling to override the Sentinel's final security locks, her fingers a blur on the console. Voss shouted, "Cade, we need that ship now." "I know!" she screamed back. "Just keep them off me!" The creatures were everywhere, moving like liquid shadows, clawing toward them, their teeth glinting in the dim light. One of them pounced, and Cole barely managed to dodge, its razor-sharp talons slicing across his shoulder plate. He hit the ground with a grunt, rolling away and firing point-blank into the creature's skull. Voss fired again, but the swarm kept coming. Then the ship spoke. "Hostile presence detected. Engaging defensive protocols." A sudden, deafening hum filled the air. The Sentinel's exterior plating shifted, glowing red as thousands of micro-turrets emerged from hidden compartments across the hull. A fraction of a second later, the warship fired. Energy lances tore through the darkness, cutting down the creatures in a storm of red-hot plasma. The air sizzled, the smell of burning flesh filling the chamber as the swarm screeched and convulsed, their bodies reduced to molten husks. One by one, they fell. Then silence. Voss exhaled sharply, scanning the battlefield. The floor was littered with the charred corpses of their attackers, smoke rising from the smoldering remains. The sentinel's turrets hummed softly, retracting back into the hull as if nothing had happened. Then the console beeped. Cade gasped. "We did it!" Voss turned to the screen. A final prompt blinked. "Sentinel fully operational." Cade looked at him. "Captain." Voss met her gaze. The ship was awake, and now it was under their command. The warship's voice resonated once more. "Awaiting mission parameters." Voss stared at the towering, resurrected beast before them. The last great weapon of humanity, lost to time, now reborn in the depths of an alien grave. With this ship, they could fight back. With this ship, they could win. He stepped forward, and he gave the order. "Sentinel, set course for war." The Sentinel drifted in the abyss, its engines humming with newfound life. Once buried, once forgotten, now a weapon reborn. Voss stood in the warship's interface chamber, staring at the holographic display. A single target blinked. A Zoltheran fortress world. Cade's voice was hushed. This ship was never meant to surrender. Cole exhaled. "So we're really doing this?" Voss's gaze hardened. "We are now." The Sentinel spoke, its voice cold, resolute. Warp drive engaged. With a flash, the warship vanished, and war followed in its wake.